Good to have you
Sorry, one
back.
second. Good to be back, Vinod. Nice to see you.
Awesome, great. I think we have quite a lot to cover this time.
Oh yeah.
I think I'll just to set the context for audience. I would like to cover the aspect of discipline that you touched upon towards the end of the
Mhm.
last podcast. And I also want to touch upon, let's say, a little bit of Greek philosophy and Plato that you brought alluded to. We'll also speak about the type of male gaze or look that women find repelling, or creepy, or acceptable, depending on the type of men he is. We'll step
Mhm.
into female choices. How does the female look at the men and why her choices of, let's say, analyzing a mate is quite ruthless, which you mentioned in your article. And then we'll see if we have time for a little more of core gender dynamics and societal aspects around that. Great.
My favorite topics. Great.
Awesome. I think one of the things I must also mention is that you went viral after that chimp part, which was rather
Uh,
unexpected, was it?
that was like the least intelligent thing I said in that hour and a half that I don't know, however long we were talking. It was just not. But I actually wondering, I was thinking to myself, why did that work? And I think it's because I just named a paradox and I didn't actually give my opinion on it. I mean, I did give an opinion, but I kind of didn't. It's the naming of the contradiction. I think people, I imagine the reaction must have been something like, "Oh wow, like I've noticed this," but like no one says it out loud. It's that type of thing. And I think that's why my writing lands with a certain slice of the population.
Awesome, great. I mean, we can't complain, right? It strikes a
No.
chord with a lot of people. Cool. I'll jump right into the first question. Anu, I think this is very important. One of the things you mentioned was feminism was anti-discipline, and that
Yeah.
it probably misdirected you or directed you into making some wrong or stupid choices. The way I looked at it, while let's say I could partly agree or disagree, the question I have in mind is feminism also gave everybody a lot of choice, particularly women. Why is
Hmm.
it that is it kind of expedient to just blame something else for the poor choices young, impressionable women end up making?
Oh, meaning blaming feminism, that is?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I mean, let me just be clear. I take full responsibility for my shitty choices. And most women perhaps don't reach the conclusion that I reach, which is that the sort of feminism, like the vibes around, like, it's not something that you are directly taught, it's like indirectly reinforced through all the women around you from the time of birth. It's just kind of in the water. So it's not so much like an ideology in the sense that I read about it teaching me, though in graduate school I did read about it and I did further imbibe it as a result of that. But you're right. We shouldn't be blaming an ideology for our actions, and we shouldn't therefore be excusing ourselves. And that's a big part of the discipline that I had to learn, which is that I am accountable for my own choices, for the outcomes of my own choices, right? And of course, like being a Hindu actually taught me this very early in life. And I'm actually I think I'm lucky to have been born Hindu, just to take it in a slightly different direction, because I had a pretty robust moral framework from before I knew English, in a way, like before I was really in the world, because the way in which there are certain stories and ideas that are passed down to us, but I also take an academic interest in all of these things. And so for example, the Mahabharata teaches me is that like that there are a multitude of types of dharma, and the consequences of actions are rather harsh. And they are of one's own doing, at least a good portion of the time, right? Like not everything is in our control in terms of what happens to us, and a good portion is predictable,
Yeah.
right? So health problems from not going to the gym, that's predictable, right? That's just a type of discipline that I was taught was oppressive to expect women to adhere to, right? Just like eating correctly and going to the gym, like having an exercise routine, because that is seen as like, oh, body shaming, or you're being mean to people. You're treating people differently based on their weight. You're creating a hierarchy of beauty, blah blah blah. And thus that led to no one is more beautiful than any other person, even though every woman who says that knows it's false. Um, but we have to say it because we have to be seen by each other as good people. So that was a bit of a meandering answer to your question. But the you're right. One shouldn't blame an ideology for one's failures. At the same time, when you grow up with this shit around you in the waters, you kind of just can't help but act according to what it teaches you. It's so difficult to resist.
Yeah, got it. I think kind of fairly relate to what you're mentioning, though it was a bit circuitous in terms of how we came from the
Indeed.
background. But I get that part of the moral fabric being laid out pretty early in life.
Yeah.
Now, since you grew up in the US, and since we are talking more about the US, and India, in fact, is aping the West to a very large
Oh
degree, and
yeah.
in fact, it's ahead that I don't see the women here any different from, let's say, most of the
I'm
women that,
surprised.
yeah, it's not any different.
I am
What's
surprised.
probably happening is there is also a reasonable effect of this, let's say, freedom of choices that I think fundamentally at some level, I'm not sure if I'm going to frame this right, but
Mhm.
I do think that the environment does play a huge role in how humans in general behave.
Hmm.
And I also think that it does more irrevocable damage, particularly in the female impressionable minds. Is that something that you've seen, let's say, pushing girls in particular in their 20s when they suddenly step out of the house and have that freedom? Have you seen in the last, let's say, 10, 15 years or in your college life that they end up making, let's say, the not so great choices?
I mean, yeah, I made not so great choices. I'll just use myself as an example, and I do that to because I'm not special. I don't behave any differently than the norm, right? That is something to recognize about ourselves, is that most of us just behave according to the incentives that are out there. I was taught that to, for example, living a libertine life in terms of one's sexual choices, that is what a man would do. Therefore, the empowered position for women is to say have sex like a man. So those are the types of choice like that is a an area of bad choices that women can make, which
Hmm.
is sleeping with the wrong man.
Yeah,
And we've all done it. And it's difficult because I don't think that the rigid sexual like norms or say that I inherited from Indian culture. I don't think that is the way to live either. But so at home I had these rigid, oh my God, so much like harsh discipline and like being locked under lock and key. And then outside I had this very libertine
yeah,
culture, especially towards sex. So it was rather confusing because I this was so oppressive, and so this was really attractive for me in particular. And I think that because of that dual life I was living, the feminism even had a stronger than that. So, okay, that's one area of bad choices. Another area of bad choices is like in your career. I think that we are taught certain things about what it takes to succeed, and almost all of those things are incorrect. And we choose sometimes like careers that perhaps are not going to serve us well, or like we otherwise resist expanding our skill set, whatever. I've actually seen now I'm almost 40. There is a crop of women who have succeeded and who are on their way, like their 40s will be a great decade for them. And then there are women who have reached almost 40 and are stagnating in their career. And you know which different kinds of choices those women made.
got it. And what would that be?
Well, one, choosing things that are very far from revenue generation, right? So I've been in recruiting, marketing. I've actually been a middle school teacher for a year. Product management, like project management. Now I'm in consulting and I'm leading a section of my firm. And it's because I learned how to take risks because selling requires taking, give me 1 second, sorry. I don't, oh, I, I'm sorry, I didn't silence my phone.
No worries.
Or do not disturb my phone, so it disturbed me. Anyway, okay. Risks, I was saying that well, in a woman's career, it is important to take risks. Therefore, it's important to one, constantly be learning new skills or like, and they don't have to be, I'm not talking about like programming. Whenever I say like whenever people say technical skills, they think programming. That's not what I mean. But to learn a variety of skills, whether that be like data analysis or like business strategy, I don't know. Don't be safe. So many of us are safe. And I also see a lot of people going after credentials. Credentials are seen as a risk-free way to advance in your career, and they are just credentials are not indicative of actual ability. So that's the sort of risk aversion that has a negative impact on how far women get. And then two, an absence of networking, especially with men, right? This is a big thing that keeps women back in their careers. And it's a recognition of reality for a woman too, not only make friends with, but also actively cultivate like relationships with men who are above her in whatever hierarchy or field, right?
Hmm.
Because they're there. I mean, I work in technical consulting. It's obviously mostly men. Obviously, I have friendships and like professional associations with them, and they, a lot of them have elevated me. And so it's like a lot of women struggle to place themselves proximal to power if power resides in the hands of men and don't realize, though, that the powerful women they're trying to curry the favor of actually don't want them to rise and are,
Ah.
are going to suppress them, right? And that reason, so the reason that women who have reached a certain plane may not want to bring the women behind them up is because those women are competition. And we don't have to behave that way. I just want to be clear. Women don't have to behave as though other women are cutthroat competition. Like there is room for more than one of us, right? But a lot of women act as though there's only room for one woman at the top, and it's just not true. It's about how you approach competition with the other woman. A lot of the time, the way women compete is not on merit at all. It has nothing to do with fucking merit. It has to do with likability, personality, and performing the social script. So if you don't perform it, women at work will cut you down. So what, for example, I learned so many lessons. Like I learned that mistakes will always be punished from a female man, like a female manager who brought me into the firm being so, saying things like, I just want smart women around me, right? That's how she brought me in. This is like a snake oil salesman. And so I learned from her that mistakes will be punished and they will be magnified and used against you, right? It took me so long to unlearn that. And those traumatic sorts of experiences, those have only come from women for me. I don't know if I'm weird, but that's the source.
Well, I think there are some studies substantiating what you said, particularly I think they call it as a queen bee syndrome, for example.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And it doesn't
So
have to be, but like that doesn't get the thing, that doesn't get it correct, I don't think. I think that stops at, some women are like become queen bee. It doesn't examine the broader psychological incentive system, right? The thing that Harvard Business Review article will never say is that women have a two-tiered competitive system at work. One is the substrate competition which is among women, and it is done at a frequency that men cannot detect. And it is based purely on vibes and purely on perception. And then before you get to the layer at which you can compete with men, a bunch of women have cut down the most competent women in this layer of competition, right? That's happened to me multiple times. But like where I am now, I mean, it would stand to reason that yes, like this did happen to me. And once I was out of their clutches in a male-dominated environment, I was fine.
awesome.
It's weird,
Great.
right?
Yeah, it is a bit weird. I also think not many people are aware of the type of let's say dynamics or intrasexual competition that goes on in the workplace between women. I don't think that's been probably studied in as much detail, or people don't want to publish the reality. I don't know what the
They don't
truth
want to
is.
ask the question. They
Yeah.
don't want to, they're not allowed to ask certain questions. That's why
Yeah.
the academy doesn't have answers to a lot of things because they never even allowed themselves to ask the question. But if you think about the way women behave psychologically, like sorry, if you think about the incentives, right? And then you think about the way women generally have evolved to behave.
I just want to understand the aspect of your reference to discipline and plateau in the last
Mhm.
conversation that we had. And a couple of follow-up questions on how did discipline help you, or does it help anyone? And when did you switch into that mode and why?
So it happened in 2020. I was, everyone's life turned upside down. I experienced a social death. I was kicked out of a friend group, which I took probably more as friends than they actually were, of course, as one does. Um, and these were like left lean, professional Democrat type friends. And I was ostracized. I lost a bunch of friends, and I realized that I actually had just been living life in a really lackadaisical manner, meaning I was floating through it. I was taking whatever decision felt correct in the moment. So emotional discipline. It's not just Plato, like the Stoicism like sort of pop that's popular at the moment, that it does take important kernels. Um, which is emotions. Okay, if you read someone like Marcus Aurelius, it is clear that he reminds himself over and over that emotions are not a source of truth. And I was taking my emotions as a source of truth. So I was honestly emotionally tyrannical to the people around me, including my partner. And it was not it wasn't a good way to be. I was feeling like feeling like a victim is also a lack of discipline in my opinion, right? So that sense of being a victim was leading me to externalize responsibility for my outcomes. It was also leading me to fixate on things and amplifying my neuroticism. And I was already depressed. So for my neuroticism to be amplified, that is an undisciplined way way in which to approach my mental health, right? So the discipline is like mental, emotional, physical. So even cultivating a reading habit, for example, I mean, I used to read a lot and then I got addicted to social media like everyone did. And so I stopped reading. And after I experienced this social death, I began reading again. And sorry, uh, I started making connections that I hadn't made before. And so that actually helped me get to where I am today, which is writing. And I always kind of have been a writer at heart. I just kind of stopped doing it because of the, again, lack of discipline. So the phone, obviously another example of a place in which I had to create discipline. So you can't just say, oh, I'm going to like form this habit. You have to apply it to every area of life, including your emotions.
Got it. One of the things that stands out very clearly from your conversation is the vulnerability aspect that you very clearly openly expressed that yes, I have made these mistakes and this is how I desire. So I think fundamentally, I think what acknowledging that someone has a problem seems to be the first step towards
Hmm.
solving something, right? I mean, it's actually quite hard for a lot of people to admit that because it hurts their ego, right?
Hmm.
Now, if you look at people around you who, let's say, want to get disciplined, what would be what would be something that you would tell them as a first step to get there?
Break the fuck up with your phone. Actually, let me restate that. Break up with your phone. That is the first step to fixing your life. I mean, there is nothing better you can do in this very moment is to decide to change your relationship with the phone. And this is happening. Like I've been hearing more and more people saying that they want to get a dumb phone or just otherwise detach, right? People understand that there's something deeply wrong. So, and the reason I say your phone is because you cannot develop discipline if you can't focus. And the nature of the media that you consume on the phone, it fragments your attention because it's short form. And even just reading anything on the phone, you're more likely to skip things and not actually absorb them. That's just something that even academics have found, like really studying phone behavior. So thus, if you don't have the ability to focus, then nothing else will happen for you in terms of discipline. So also, the other thing that even Cal Newport advises is adopt the identity of a disciplined person. It doesn't have to be that I hit this habit every day. It is, I am a disciplined person, therefore I'm going to do this thing even though it sucks. The most obvious example being going to the gym. Going to the gym fucking sucks. But now I can't, even if I know it's going to hurt, I just I just automatically force myself now. I don't know. It's just a thing that happens over time. And you know, you had sent me that video of that woman. Can't remember what your qualifications even were. Excuse me, I'm having sinus issues.
Yeah, yeah. No worries.
Give me
Take your
one
time.
second. I'm actually gonna get some tissues. One second.
Sure, sure, sure. Take your time.
Okay, so you had sent me a video by a woman who said you can't expect women to have discipline about going to the gym. Wasn't that the gist of it? Okay, that was. So I guess the argument is because women have hormonal fluctuations and just otherwise experience the world differently and are more emotionally sensitive, you can't expect them to go to the gym because the way their emotions influence them is different from how they influence men in terms of doing something like going to the gym. That is that is a great example of this attitude. I mean, it's just I couldn't have said it better, honestly. And then actually when I argue this, often women come for me saying, "Where did you hear feminism discourages discipline?" But like this woman is literally
Yeah,
saying it.
yeah,
So,
exactly. I found that very disingenuous and crappy. I mean, to be very honest, telling that, oh, this is an
oh yeah.
excuse for you not to get healthy or fit, right? I think, contrary to what people think, I have inadvertently developed more respect for women who actually go to the gym. Because if
Hmm.
you actually think about it,
Yeah.
it's not technically super necessary for them to become more attractive to attract someone. Also, if you look
No.
at from that angle, right? You can just
Yeah.
be as it is, and you still get the attention that you want, if that being one of your life's motives too. Whereas for men, we're not born beautiful. We
Yeah.
have to build those muscles, and there's no other choice. So I understand our
Hmm.
compulsion
I
to
see
go to
what you
get
mean.
fit. Yeah. So I think I do have a lot of respect for such women who can still go and grind, and there are quite a few women that I see in my gym too. Okay, cool, great. Okay, I'll get back into the female gaze and male gaze right now. One thing that we spoke about extensively last time is the type of men's attention or gaze that women generally preferred. I think you established that very beautifully. What I also wanted to understand was this lot of thought of also creepy look, even from, let's say, some of the high status men, that can happen. Now, how do you distinguish, or how do women in general distinguish something as a creepy look? When I say it's not a metaphorical, right? It's actual physical look. What is
Yeah.
considered a behavior or a look that is creepy versus acceptable from all strata of men?
You know, it's
It's
I'm
hard, I
actually
know.
I'm evaluating my own assessment of
Yeah.
men looking. So, okay. I don't okay, I've actually stopped categorizing the like any mo most instances as creepy. I stopped doing that a while ago. So, an instance, a former work colleague I knew was looking at me in a particular way. That was creepy because the context was he was above me in the hierarchy. That's creepy because it is, and I'm just using that as shorthand for it creates a great deal of discomfort in that particular context in which it's happening. Right. And then, okay, so social gatherings. I know when men are looking. It's just something you know. You're like hyper attuned to it. It's almost like a self-surveillance. I actually think about, oh, like if I wear this thing, will I attract like a lot of male attention? And so I just don't wear it because, well, it's uncomfortable. That it's uncomfortable, especially in my opinion, when you are paired off. I recognize that I sound rather conservative when I say that, but it's just not a thing that I want to particularly try to attract toward myself, right? Because I shouldn't need that validation from other men if I'm already in a relationship. I mean, it just strikes me as strange. Um, so if other men are looking in a social context, I guess it's not a creepy look would be like incessantly staring. It's one thing to look and then look away. It's another to like keep looking or otherwise linger for like more than 3 seconds, you know? And you can
Mhm.
tell when a man is lingering, you know?
Got it. Cool. I guess men will hopefully learn something out of it. I don't. It's going to take a lot of practice for
Uh,
them, though. Yeah.
so see, but like, okay, so the approach, right? Because we were thinking about the approach. So say a guy sees a woman that he, finds attractive and like then wants to approach. It's difficult because the context that men used to approach in, no one goes out drinking anymore. I guess like for a certain generation, it's fine to approach people at a bar because people still go to bars like millennials and older, but the younger generation doesn't drink. And so if you're a 20 something man, there's no bars. The place that I could think of most obviously was like activities, shared activities, so like running clubs or something. I don't know. If you a mixed gender activity based group, that would be appropriate, I think. Work it can be appropriate if neither party is paired off or, it's not a direct power relationship.
Hmm.
In that case, in the case of a direct power relationship, that fine, those people should still be free to be in a relationship if they want, I guess. But the problem is you can so easily call it sexual harassment. So it becomes too risky to actually do. And in my case, it actually was sexual harassment, right? And he was married and I'm married. I mean, that's just like that would be entirely inappropriate. But if both parties were single, whatever, I don't know. I think it's probably fine. Because we used to meet people at work. We used to meet our mates at work, and now we can't do that anymore because of these sorts of rules.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to come to. I think I did some read a research paper where they said almost 40-50% of marriages were fixed due to workplace and interacting in the workplace. I mean, if you're spending 8-9 hours at work, I mean, that's where probably you're going to find your best mates,
Oh,
right? I mean, it's very unlikely you'll find
also,
somewhere outside.
okay, someone else said this, and I can't remember who, and so I can't attribute it, but actually, women especially get to see men at work in the sense that you get a sense of their ambition and ability and things. And that's important when a woman evaluates a man. That is part of the female gaze, is the assessment of the personality, thereby assessment of the confidence and the ability to put oneself out there in the world, right? She may not expect it of herself, but she will expect it out of a man. Thereby, a workplace is a good way to find a man like that.
It's perfect. I think that sets up wonderfully to understand uh, how do we define a female gaze. Let's start with that.
Yeah. So it's more than looking, right? Like so uh my husband walking down the street in a suit experienced a lot of female attention, like women actually came up to him. And then he was also wearing a hoodie the other 2 days, and of course no one paid attention to him. So like the evaluation is of a man's like presentation. Does the presentation indicate wealth? Then so that's like a physical evaluation. But men can be I mean, honestly, men get away with a lot of things with regard to physicality that women couldn't get away with, right? Um, so there's that sort of asymmetry, like that definitely exists. But then a woman is assessing his ability to provide and protect. Therefore, the body becomes a site of assessment for sure. And then the clothes, of course, indicate the provider ability and just other indications of wealth. I think the female gaze is that, but I think it's also, as we were talking about at work, an evaluation of a man's personality, thereby his ability to, I don't know, go make money, I guess, just for lack of a better way of putting it.
Yeah, good. And that's a fair point. You did mention in your article that women's criteria for mate selection is more ruthless in general.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate?
Yeah, so it's more ruthless because we have historically had children to provide for, right? And so if you can't historically have been able to work, of course, you're going to be more selective about who you sleep with. Like, I mean, that's just women are more selective. Women have more filters because we have to be more selective about than men just have had to be. Just this is across cultures. In general, women should like have good reason to be more discerning in mate choice. But of course, the divorcing of childbearing from sex has also made us less discerning because it's removed the trade-off of the having of the child for sleeping with the wrong man, right? So that's it's more ruthless because it evaluates more aspects of one's life rather than visual beauty.
Got it. Got it. And if let's say a man has to make himself, this is, I mean, I want to appeal to all the young men who are struggling in dating life in general, which seems to be the pattern in the last 10, 15 years. If a man has to make himself worthy enough of, let's say, a good female attention and a good gaze, what do you reckon he should be doing to fit into those, let's say, top 5 percentage or 10 percentage that women would prefer?
Confidence and ambition are incredibly important. It doesn't matter what you're making right now. The question is like, can you signal to a woman that you have potential despite what you are making right now? Right? So if you think about where a young man is in his 20s, you're not making that much, relatively speaking. You've yet to hit your peak earning years. So your way of signaling mate potential is signaling confidence and ambition. And there are ways to do that without necessarily that being in your professional career. It's just the way you are out in the world. And there are men who, because we're all addicted to our phones in this particular generation, especially, many men have not developed the ability to get rejected. Scott Galloway talks about this a lot. Like he advises men to like be more comfortable with rejection. And honestly,
Hmm.
that is that's like a resilience that we should all build up, but men especially because they're going to get rejected a lot. And so a lot of the time also I imagine like if you're going to struggle, if you struggle to talk to women, that means you're not comfortable enough with rejection, in my opinion. And unfortunately, because women have to be more discerning, men are just going to experience more rejection. So that going to the gym is another thing. I mean, and I'm not saying this as a double standard. I
Yeah.
expect myself to go to the gym, just to be clear. And you also mentioned the gym earlier. I mean, it's kind of necessary. Have some sense of discipline that you can signal because that says that you are a stable person. So going to the gym is a type of discipline you can signal, and the fact that you have your life together, like you should be able to show that you have a stable life and you're not just living day to day without a plan, right? A lot of men are, do live that way, and even in, my age bracket. Uh, and then, perhaps the third thing is just general appearance. Put effort into the shit, like, oh, sorry, put effort into the clothes you wear. That's just, it's absolutely necessary. And I'm not saying this in a superficial way. I put effort in the clothes I wear at work, for example, because I know what impression I want to give off. And so the clothes, like the self-presentation matters a lot to a woman, perhaps more than it matters to a man. Meaning, you will evaluate a woman in terms of looks, right? But you're not like evaluating her outfit, where she's
Yeah.
evaluating your outfit.
I think it's very interesting, right? I think three, four important points you mentioned was, okay, you said confidence, ambition, and bunch of these things come from the fact that you're, you have to be a stable person, you have to be disciplined in some form, put your life together, and also the way you present yourself, which is the, let's say, the dressing aspect and what you wear, the outfit. I think on at least one aspect I've generally observed where I lacked a lot, and also all men lack even today, is
Hmm.
the presentation aspect of
Oh, okay.
dressing. Uh, I do think that it's my hypothesis that when we used to try and dress well, even in colleges or other times, the other men would actually make fun of us and say, "Hey, what the hell are you doing, man? It's a kind of a girly thing to do."
Huh.
So it
Yeah, yeah.
naturally dissuades us because we don't do makeups, right? Not no men. I mean,
Right,
at
right.
least men are not used to makeups nowadays. People are doing things like looks maxing and other things, which is a new trend, by the way, in the Gen Z world.
Hmm.
But going back to my generation, at least, dressing was not something that we took real interest in or in being super presentable to the women. It was not a thought that came to a lot of us. Very few men
Because
did that.
because you made fun of each other, just
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
clear.
So
Okay.
they would just say, "Hey, what the hell are you doing, man? Dressing up like a girl," you know? So the immediate pun was to tell you, put you down to not do that. I think it's a just the way girls have intrasexual jealousy in some form. I do think this was insinuating that, I don't want you to look too attractive to the other gender, but without being explicit.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. It's a competitive suppression mechanism.
Yeah, and I do think that men even today lack this quite a lot now. I mean, I learned a lot in the last 3 4 years, particularly after, let's say, working out. And I think fundamentally what also happens, Anu, is if you start going to the gym, you naturally get into a confident state. Your body starts to shape better. You
Yes.
start to look better. And pretty much, I think I'm wearing a, I think $10 t-shirt. It's probably like 200 rupees in India, right? It just fits well. I don't
Yeah.
really care for the
Yeah.
brand,
Yeah,
CK or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
right?
Clothes fit differently,
Like just
absolutely.
200 bucks on the street, I got it, right? So I think
A
I
good
think this
shirt.
is yeah. I do think that we need a lot of female and male role models to tell young men that their dressing is obviously very important. A good pair of couple of shoes, formals, and one the flat ones.
Hmm.
A couple of good pants, belts, accessory like a watch, and just comb your hair and look neat. I mean, I don't think. I think Jordan Peterson says it very clearly if you watch it, right? Just be hygienic.
Yes, I almost used that word actually. Because men do, I'm sorry, men can have terrible fucking hygiene and just, oh my God, your bathrooms are disgusting. Male bathrooms are disgusting. I cannot handle it. Like, clean your fucking bathroom. If you have a woman over, your bathroom better be clean. Just basic advice. First principle. Damn it.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
that's
like the
okay.
fourth thing that fell.
Too much of reading. Yeah, I think one of the I think we have kind of established well on the female gaze, male gaze, the criteria for a
Uh,
man to become more attractive to the opposite gender, which I think is very important, by the way, and not to be dismissed by any means of imagination. One of the things you also wanted to speak about last year was a little bit of juxtaposition of the Indian versus the US milieu. Would you like to elaborate on the Desi
er,
women raised in the
y-
US with, let's say, the background of Indian context and the things around that?
Sorry, Vinod, 1 second. You it did the thing again where you froze and then went really
Did
fast.
I?
Okay, so
Okay.
I think you asked about base. Yeah, 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 it's fine. I think you're back now. So you asked about Desi women raised in the US and then
Yeah.
like the sort of thing we were talking about. Okay, so we're talking about women raised Indian American women or women of Indian origin, shall we say,
Yeah.
raised in the United States. There is a particular way in which we indicate affinity to the largely white professional middle slash professional managerial class, which is adhering to their moral values and signaling that adherence. So, professional middle class women in the US in general who are college educated tend to be on the left, meaning they tend to have illiberal views about speech and like what constitutes justice, like equity over equality of opportunity, that sort of thing. They tend to believe in that. They tend to believe in, suppression of merit, for example. And this is the sort of way in which they signal moral superiority, that they are good people. Having the right beliefs, and these are not the only beliefs. Having the right beliefs is actual social capital for women in the professional middle class. It's not actual capital, it is moral capital. So if Indian American women like myself in the professional class in the US have to fit in with the other women, and we ourselves also feel rather guilty because a lot of us have class privilege. A lot of us grew up in very wealthy households because vast majority of the median income of the average Indian American is like ridiculously high. I mean, there's so much wealth among the Desis in the US, like it's obscene. Um, and so they grew up with massive wealth privilege. So there's also a measure of guilt there that they have to absolve because their white girlfriends feel guilty about being white. We have to feel guilty about being wealthy or like Hindu because, Muslims are akin to black people. Like this is the equivalence that is made, right? Because you're Hindu, you are of an oppressive culture. Thereby, you also need to feel guilty about like Modi being prime minister. That sort of logic. And so the video we were looking at where this Indian American doctor who's raised in the
Yeah.
US refuses to say whether men can get pregnant. She's indicating she's indicating allegiance to a leftist sort of set of sort of social beliefs, whereby men and women are interchangeable. There is no biological sex. This is what she adheres to. The shorthand for it among people who disagree is gender ideology. So she's an adherent of this ideology that largely professional class, like college educated women believe, right? This is not something largely that heterosexual men are pushing. Like there are like several men, for example, who are crusading against this, insisting on biological reality of, of sex as sexual dimorphism, essential sexual dimorphism, it being true and real, and you cannot change sex. So this woman, gains acceptance in the professional middle class and managerial class by professing these beliefs. And so we also, the last thing I will say on this is we lend melanin. So I call it melanin as a service to the white women around us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we give them we give their social program legitimacy. So DEI policies, for example, and feminist policies in the work, like feminist origin policies in the workplace. And they give us positions in the
Ah.
American upper class.
Do you think it's some
And
kind
then
of
men, of course. Yeah.
like you
Yeah. No,
mentioned
no, go
about
ahead.
the small trade-off here, right? I mean, you giving them something and they giving you something in return, particularly with the white women and the brown skin trade off a little bit. Why do you think that's happening? Like, what's the underlying
Why?
thought? Yeah, thought that there must be something going on here.
Yeah, okay. One thing that's going on is just mere status jockeying, right? You're going to position yourself if you want to win. So, if you've grown up, like I grew up certainly feeling rather otherized by the white girls, regardless, right? Um, every every woman like me who grew up in a certain time where there weren't that many Indians here, so in the 90s, not that many Indians. The experience of the average high school Indian American girl, totally different now. But when I was growing up, it was rather lonely. There were no other Daisies. There was just you had to fit in somehow. You had to fit in. So this performance, of course, is required to fit in just from childhood. You just kind of it's an adaptation you have. How do you fit in with the white girls around you? Because that's just how it had to be. Because you got to make friends with the girls around you, otherwise you're a total loner. Boys and girls don't make friends early on in school. It's like a
Yeah,
same-sex friend group. So there's that, the status. And then I suppose the other reason, I mean, I think like women in this class, especially those who are born in this class, so the college educated class, professional middle class, they have a strong need to feel like good people. Feeling like a good person
mm,
is more important than actually being a good person. So if your self-concept is I'm a good person, you can't accept that you might have harmed somebody, right? And that's how we get the phenomenon of women can't be wrong. So
ah,
we have absorbed this sort of this idea that women are incapable of being wrong. Ergo, we are also going to act like any woman who thinks she's incapable of being wrong, right? If that's what the atmosphere was, that was just there.
interesting. It's more like the optics of being nice to the people around.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not.
Yes. Perception is more important than reality, right? We hear that a lot in the corporate world. Perception is reality. Like, think about how fucked up that is that we've just accepted that as fact. That is, I mean, but if you think about the feminine, that's perception, right? Like, okay, so take the Hindu conception of Maya. That's like so she's like symbolic of what one perceives, whether it is real or not. And then there's reality. There's Purusha, for lack of a better term. I mean, I don't think that term is gendered. That is, Prakriti is material reality, and Purusha is like like consciousness, and then consciousness observing reality creates what we have. And the reason I go down that is like, hmm, perception has replaced reality, especially at work, right? The way we work actually has much more to do with managing the perception of us than actually what we do. And the same thing has now happened out in the world, right? Your perception on the internet is much more important than who you are as a human being in the physical world. Um, and so I would say in some ways, like the feminine has shrouded actual reality because we're so concerned with how we're perceived versus how we are. And men very often capitulate because they don't want to have the fight. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
you are all being cowards. I'm simply saying that you want to avoid the fight, so you just don't have it. I get it. I get it. But that logic also then allows a woman to think that she is always right. And as you actually said, she won't respect you.
Mm.
You were saying it about attention, but I'm saying it about a lack of pushback. If
Yeah.
you don't push back, she will lose respect for you. That's just gonna happen.
Yeah. I think you made a very, very important points, and in fact, two very important points that needs elaboration as a separate topic. Probably we'll get to that in the session number three, right? One is this aspect of a woman being herself versus the perception. If that is something that she is continuously fighting to make sure the perception of her is being good,
Hmm.
I think that's a pretty hard life in general for anyone,
Oh
much less
yeah.
being a
Oh
woman,
God,
right?
yeah.
It's really pretty hard. I do tend to think that that's probably going to put her in some kind of a incongruent way of life, because
Oh
it's really
yeah.
hard to be one and then to be something else to the other world, right? The second part is about men being cowards. I think I agree to that because a lot of my male friends, they just don't argue with their wives, no matter what. Oh, happy wife, happy life. I don't know where that BS came
I
from.
hate that.
I
Hate that.
I don't know where that came from. I mean, you wouldn't do that to another man, right? I mean, grow a spine. Just call out the BS
Yes.
where it is. And
Thank you.
what they don't understand is that, and this for young men who are listening into this, right? So what they don't understand is women respect that. And if
Yeah.
they don't respect you, they can't fall in love with you, they can't sleep with you. As simple as that. It's so there's all this pickup lines that your red pill is teaching you or the other world is teaching you. Guys, none of those things work, right? Grow a
No.
spine, define your boundaries, and talk to her as if she's another human. Forget that she's a girl with different parts that you like. That's not the way to look at things. I do
Yeah.
think that men do this because I think they're actually scared of pissing her off, and
Yeah.
I think the women senses it, not even without him saying
Yeah.
a word. He just
Yeah.
looks like a pusillanimous fellow, for lack of a better word, right?
You
I
can't. And see the capitulation that reinforce that like shows her that perhaps you are not as sturdy or reliable as perhaps you need to be. And then I've also heard many women friends like talk about this, like how they find it problematic if like no one ever calls them on their bullshit because they know they have bullshit, but if no one calls them on it, like there's no respect, as you were saying. Um, because I think women also tend toward neuroticism, and
Yeah,
neuroticism is just bad for relationships in general. And this is something we don't talk about enough, in my opinion. Like we talk about personality psychology, but no one really like we haven't really dug deep into the consequences of female neuroticism, especially for a relationship. And so if you neuroticism will lead you one to perfectionism, which is corrosive again, because like I have a way of loading the dishwasher. My husband's never going to do it that way, and I just have to accept that. It's
yeah,
just, it's fine. There's no perfect way. My way is better, but there's never, like, he's just never going to know. He's never going to be, he's never going to fold his clothes properly, and I just need to not care. It doesn't matter. But
yeah, yeah,
there are many women who have fights with their husbands about this
yeah,
sort
yeah,
of thing, right? He cannot hang the clothes properly on the hanger, and it drives me nuts. But again, he can do so many other things. Like he can write, he's very smart. How can you be so smart and not know how to hang your clothes on the hanger? That's what I don't understand, actually, truly.
yeah.
I want to know.
I think that's the male paradox. I think I fall under the bucket. Like just yesterday evening,
Yeah.
my wife had told me to keep certain vessels in some place which I kept in slightly different place, and there was a 10-minute ranting session after she came from work, and my son is laughing and me and my daughter are standing like that Mickey
Ah.
Mouse in front of the, I don't know, cat or whatever. She's
Mhm.
just shouting and I'm just listening, and then I ended up laughing after some point, and my one of the things is like, did it really matter? That's what I asked.
No.
Then that got her enraged even further. But I think that is I think it's the wiring. I also think I agree with that. I think the fundamental thing that you mentioned about neuroticism, I think that's a very important concept. I actually wrote a blog about that.
Oh,
Also about the insecurities of pretty women and the pretty women privileges, and also the negatives that come with it.
oh,
And
I
I
need to go.
also, yeah, I'll send you that link. And I
Yeah.
also think that women score way high on neuroticism,
Oh, yeah,
and
on the
it,
whole.
yeah, and it does have both positives and negatives, right? I mean, it also
It
makes you
does.
more alert to threat perceptions, like you said.
And we have to be,
Yeah, and you
right?
had
Like
to be
that makes
an
sense.
yeah, and that's why your analysis and your ruthlessness in terms of analyzing men or other threats, etc., or the perception of a place. Like you would have seen that, right? When women enter a place, they quickly glance up and down the room and they kind of assess, like, okay, is this place safe enough? It's phenomenal the way their mind works. I think,
Hmm.
yeah, it has both positives and
Well, it's
negatives.
the knowing, okay, knowing where every single thing is in the house. I mean, that is an exclusively female like talent. And it makes, I mean, if you're if you're gathering stuff in hunter-gatherer times, you of course have to know where all the stuff is, you know. And there are things that different things we are good at, and society requires both of those sets of things to run appropriately. Now, I would actually gladly stop working. And see, this is the funny thing. I was taught that career ambition is the greatest potential achievement, right? If it, if anyone were to celebrate, oh, like, you got married or like you had a kid, it's seen as kind of like cons anti-progressive to
Yeah.
like celebrate that sort of thing. Like career success is the sort of thing you're supposed to celebrate. And now that I have career success, I actually just want to stay home. Um, it's funny how that works. Like if I had a kid, I would want to stay home. I don't have one, but if I had one, it's a luxury actually, staying home. And feminism taught me that it was oppressive to stay home.
Yeah.
It's funny
Yeah.
how that's come like full circle, right? And you're
Yeah.
right though. The arguments don't matter. I used to have arguments with my ex-husband all the time about shit that didn't matter. I actually had to stop having arguments with my current husband about things that don't matter. And now I find myself like, oh, like I would have gotten angry about this thing 5 years ago, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything. And I have this conversation with myself where I expect anger to arise. It just doesn't arise anymore because I decided it doesn't matter. And this is the power of it. You can actually decide to not care. And a
Yeah.
lot of women struggle to let it go. And by the way, going back to discipline, tamping down on the neuroticism is an essential thing, is a discipline that women ought to cultivate, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think that's probably the next set of sessions that classes
Yeah,
or
I'll have to read up
podcasts I'll
on
have with you,
all
and a
this.
little bit on neuroticism, more on discipline and
Yeah.
aspect of career versus childhood. I think that's for the next.
Oh,
Thanks
yeah.
for
Yeah,
uh,
definitely.
thanks for
Thank
tuning,
you.
Anu. I'll catch you soon next week.
Yeah, talk to you later. Take care.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.